All right, guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined as usual by Scott Karasik. We are back today to break down the offensive positional battles heading into training camp involving the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, we'll be answering your mailbag questions. But kicking things off, as we often do on the show, we talk about any roster moves that have happened since we last did the show, which was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the Falcons cut Devin Fuller, the official cut that basically was a long time coming, and they wound up getting Calvin Ridley, their first round pick, signed to a contract. For some reason, it took them this long to get a deal done, but finally got done. Scott, any thoughts on these two roster moves?
I was expecting Calvin Ridley to definitely get signed pretty soon. I thought he was already signed, but I guess not. And then I thought Devin Fuller was already cut because he wasn't showing up on any of the NFLPA documents. So I think they just made it official with the league office. But it's basically the roster is exactly what we thought it would be. Ridley in, Fuller out.
Yeah, no, it was interesting with Devin Fuller just because they had never officially cut him because they waived him injured last summer as opposed to actually outright cutting him, which means when you get cut and you clear waivers, you go in the IR. And so basically when you go, the only area that seemed to indicate that Devin Fuller was still on the roster where if you went through the NFL's official transactions, what they have up at various websites, including NFL.com, you never saw Devin Fuller's name appear on that at any point in the last 11 months. And the fact that the NFLPA salary cap sheet always had the Falcons with 91 players on their roster as opposed to 90. And it was always the suspicion of mine that 91st player was always Devin Fuller. Now it says 90. And so that was basically, this was a move, I guess, that the Falcons had been planning on doing for a while. Maybe, I don't know, maybe someone forgot to fax it over to the league office 6 months ago or something like that. But yeah, so,
Probably all it was.
Pretty much. And so, yeah, because he hasn't appeared on the official sites of Wire roster since August, I think. So, yeah, so, Calvin Ridley, there was a report when we first, that first week of May, I think, was what created the confusion for a lot of people thinking that he signed. Zach Klein tweeted out basically his contract details because due to the slotting, you already kind of know exactly how much guys are going to make. So he basically tweeted out that when Calvin Ridley signs, he will make this much money, and people misconstrued that by thinking that meant that he had already signed. So he hadn't really signed yet. So, whatever he was trying to get in his contract before signing, whatever, I don't know, maybe offsets. Usually these last few NFL rookies, wait to try to get offsets. It's a thing, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, let's move on and talk about these training camp battles. And we're going to be talking about the offense on tonight's show. We'll be talking about the defense in 2 weeks on the week before training camp starts. And then the following week, we'll actually training camp practice will have start by then, and we'll have actual football to talk about as opposed to the endless months of speculation that we have been going through over the last 6 months. So,
which would be nice.
Yes, very much so. So, guys, let's start out with the quarterback position. We know Matt Ryan's secure. There is some talk that maybe Matt Schaub is a little bit on a hot seat, that maybe the Falcons could wind up cutting him in favor of going with one of these younger guys like a Garrett Grayson or Kurt Binkert as their number 2 quarterback. It certainly would save them a lot of cap space, but I think at the same time, given the Falcons' playoff aspirations and Super Bowl aspirations, I think having a veteran backup quarterback on the roster is much more valuable to this Falcons coaching staff, particularly given Matt Schaub's past and basically being an extra quarterback coach for Matt Ryan as they try to get Matt Ryan, Steve Sarkisian, and now Greg Knapp on the same page. So I don't think Matt Schaub is really in any danger of getting cut unless he gets injured or something like that. But I do think one of these young guys in Grayson or Binkert could, if they have a good enough camp, potentially make a run and force the Falcons to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. What are your thoughts, Scott?
I think it's more likely we see 3 quarterbacks on the roster than Matt Schaub cut. I don't think Matt Schaub's ever going to get cut. I think he's going to finish out his contract, and then he's going to retire, and then he's going to go into coaching and, be Matt Schaub. And I think the best chance is Garrett Grayson. I don't think Kurt Benkert's that good. There's a reason why a guy goes undrafted, especially a guy like Kurt Benkert, and it's because they're not very good. They're just a guy. They're not too different than if I was like 6'5" making those kind of throws. Like it's like that's like he's not good. And I'm saying that I'm not very good at throwing a ball accurately. I don't think Kurt Benkert's very good at throwing a ball accurately either.
Yeah, Baker's an interesting player just because, like, if you watch like his 3 best games last year at UVA, UConn, Boise State, and Miami, like he looks really good in those games. Like he looks like a 4th, 5th round pick in those games. But pretty much every other game, he's kind of just a guy. And so I guess it's really a question of whether the guy that played in that Miami game or in those other 2 games, does he show up for, the whole month of training camp and in the preseason, or is it more likely, and the odds are certainly in the favor, if 75% of his games he was just a guy and 25% of his games he looked really good, obviously the odds favor one over the other. If he just shows up and is just a guy, then I think probably the best case scenario for him is the practice squad as opposed to making the roster. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will see. I don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but I'm expecting him to be just a guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would like to get excited about another young phenom quarterback. We haven't had one of those guys since, the heyday of John Parker Wilson and Dominique Davis to come in and really, get people buzzing in training camp. Sean Renfrey was okay when he was here, but he was never one of those guys that's like, oh, this Sean Renfrey guy's got a really lot of talent that we could develop. So I'm eager. I hope Banker does it. Even if Grayson does it, I would like to see something to get excited about in the 3rd and 4th quarters of some of these preseason games, at least as far as the offense is going. Let's talk about the running back position as well as the fullback position. I don't know if there's a whole lot to talk about the running back position. It seems like, we pretty much know the 3 guys are going to make the team, and maybe, the other guys are just basically fighting for a practice squad spot. Maybe one of those guys comes in and surprises us and lights it up. But I think the real competition here is at the fullback position. What are your thoughts on this, Scott?
I don't think that the fullback that the Falcons are going to eventually start is even on the roster. That's kind of my thoughts on that. If it is, it's going to be Marks, just because he's the only one that's played in a pro-style scheme. He's the only one that really kind of understands how to block. I don't think McNitt is good at all. And he played in that wonky-ass Nebraska offense, which I can't tell you how much I despise the triple option in college football and its translation to the NFL. It doesn't translate at all. Nobody in that offense really makes any sense when you look at them for the NFL. Like, running backs play quarterback, quarterbacks play this wing back. Their tailbacks are not exactly tailbacks. Like, they basically have wide receivers running. Like, the offense makes no damn sense. Not for NFL translation. And that's probably why there are so many good quarterbacks and so many good players in those offenses that just blow when they get to the NFL. Because it doesn't translate at all. So I guess for me on that one, like, I don't know. I don't like Luke McNitt. I think he's going to have a curve of coming from the wonky offense to, a normal standard offense. And then the Falcons are going to sit there at the end of training camp and go, is Marks really that good, or do we have to sign someone? And I think they're going to be like, well, this guy got cut, and this guy got cut, and this guy got cut, and this guy got cut. They should have just kept Lewis Nix when they had the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sorry. Did you mean Roosevelt Nix?
Yeah, Roosevelt Nix, not Lewis Nix.
Okay.
Roosevelt Nix when they had a chance.
It threw me off a little bit. I was like, wait, Lewis Nix, the guy from Notre Dame?
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. That's why I had to pause. Like, wait.
But what's crazy about that is it's possible that the Steelers cut Roosevelt Nix because they went out and they got Jalen Samuels in the draft.
Yeah, I am curious how the Steelers sort of juggle that, because I don't know what they envision for Jalen Samuels. Is he going to be a wide receiver? He's going to be a tight end. He's going to be H-back,
They
running
have him
back.
wearing 38, and they're listing him as a fullback.
Okay.
So that makes me think that he was drafted to replace Roosevelt Nix, which doesn't make sense to me because Roosevelt Nix went to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
And then why didn't Dimitri Flowers come to Atlanta as a free agent? It's like
Where
that's
did he
the
wind
easiest
up?
spot. He wound up with the Jets.
Oh, okay. I wasn't a huge fan of Dimitri Flowers. I think he was a little overrated personally, but obviously I would probably prefer him over some of the other options that the Falcons currently have. But I don't feel like he would have been a slam dunk to make the team. Yeah, the fullback position is interesting. You got Daniel Marks. I'm gonna put right on the Ricky Ortiz bandwagon. I feel like he's the front runner of this group, but I'm with you. I think at best it's a 50-50 shot that one of these three guys makes the team, and the other 50% chance is that the Falcons bring in somebody else later on, and we'll see who's available. If teams are shopping fullbacks late in the preseason, which is something I get excited about, but I'm sure most fans don't really care too much about. But we'll see what happens. I know Houston basically, after they paid Jay Prosh, they basically eliminated him from the playbook with the introduction of Deshaun Watson. So he was the guy that I was like pushing for the Falcons to, maybe trade for last summer. Obviously that didn't go down, but maybe they can get it on the second go round in 2018. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think the fullback position is going to be an intriguing battle, and we'll see how it plays out. It is probably the biggest question mark on the roster, on the entire team, which is a good thing because most people would agree that if you were power ranking the 22 positions that you need in the NFL, fullback is without a doubt number 22. And so if your least important position is your biggest question mark, that's a pretty good place to be, particularly when it involves the other 21 spots on the roster. So big question mark there, but obviously not necessarily a huge deal in terms of the overall team success, or at least you hope not. You hope that the Falcons can get more than bottom shelf level production out of that position a year after moving on from Derek Coleman. So we'll see what happens.
I hope they can at least get middle shelf production.
Yeah, that's the hope. Let's talk about the wide receiver position. And this should be a fun group. I think this group of guys that the Falcons brought to camp this year should make for a very exciting group. To me, I guess the bigger question is whether or not the Falcons quarterbacks that aren't named Matt will be able to get them the ball. But we got Calvin Ridley, that he's going to be probably the biggest storyline involving the offense this summer. At least people intrigued by his upside, his potential, and how involved he is in the offense. Is he going to get the equivalent of starters reps? Is he going to see the field 50% of the time? The Falcons use three wide receivers or use multiple wide receivers. They only use three wide receivers about 40% of the time last year, but multiple wide receivers as in three or more about 55% of the time last year. Is that number going to go up to 60, 70% and be on par with some of the other teams that is more, I guess now the new normal in the NFL is three wide receivers about 60 to 70% of the time in the league now, and really has an opportunity to do that. And of course, there's some position battles as far as the depth at the back end of the roster, where the Falcons have also added guys like Russell Gage, but you have guys like Marvin Hall and Reggie Davis, among others, sort of pushing for time. Scott, what are your thoughts on this wide receiver position?
I like the group, and I like the group a lot. It's a very competent, very intelligent group. A lot of good route runners, a lot of guys who have underneath, like they've got great athleticism, but underneath that, they've got more substance to their game because of different positions that they've played throughout the years. Like Lamar Jordan was a quarterback. So he kind of understands this thing that, what's his name? Ethan Hammerman and I developed. It's called empathetic route running, where he's like, I know where the quarterback wants me to go because I was once a quarterback. So let me just see if I can run over here, catch the ball. So Lamar Jordan, he was recruited as a quarterback. He played quarterback a couple of years in college before switching. I wouldn't hate the idea of him playing receiver, and being one of the main Falcons receivers. Todd, Taj Williams is a burner who's 6'4", but his route running, I mean, he's one of the few guys who's big, but his route running sucks. The one guy who I was shocked that was even drafted was Russell Gage. And it's funny to me that he wears 83 because I think his potential could be that of like a Harry Douglas at his best. Like normal Harry Douglas is Gage's best. Like that Harry Douglas that fell down on that reception in 2012, that's Russell Gage's best. Yeah, that's what I'm expecting from Russell Gage. So I don't see anything more than a special teamer. Now, could he be the guy who ends up being returner, kick returner, punt returner, the next Allen Rossum? I'm not going to say he's Devin Hester, but could he be like the next Allen Rossum? I could see that. So I don't see a ton of like talent in this group outside of the main 5 guys. And that being, Julio, Sanu, Ridley, Hardy, and then Marvin Hall. Outside of those 5 guys, I don't see a ton of that true potential. I like Reggie Davis as a burner, but I don't know what else he can do. So that's where I'm at with that group.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think, in terms of, are any of these guys outside of the main core going to be more than like 4th wide receivers that are sort of in the same mold of what Marvin Hall and Nick Williams have been the last couple of years? Probably not. But I do think they have
but
some.
Do they have to be? Is the real question.
I mean, that's really the issue. Is like the Falcons. I think looking at their group of these young wide receivers, like, I think Marvin Hall's probably going to win the 6th spot. I agree with you on Russell Gage. I don't see a ton of upside for him on offense, but I'll be curious to see. Maybe he shows a little bit more than I think he has.
I think he's the 5 spot. I think the 6th spot is Russell Gage, because I think Gage is just a true, honestly, I think Gage probably ends up moving to cornerback when it's all said and done. And I know you talked about it, but the more I watch him, I don't see a receiver. I see a guy who goes out there and just fights for the ball like a D-back. So I could see him halfway through the season just being told by Raheem Morris, like, dude, get your ass over to defense. I'm going to call up Reggie Davis from the practice squad, and we're just going to have 6 receivers.
No, I think that's fair. And what I mean by Russell Gage being in the 5 spot, because what you mentioned with him being special teams, he's going to be active every game. And so basically he's going to be the 5th receiver active every single week. It's going to be Julio, Sanu, Hardy, and Ridley playing a wide receiver, then Russell Gage playing that 5th spot being active. He's not going to play on offense. He's just going to play special teams. And that 6th guy is basically probably going to be Marvin Hall, who is basically in the event that one of those top 4 guys gets injured, because he can play special teams as well. He's sort of your other guy on the roster that's basically inactive most weeks. But so I think with Gage, I think you're right. Probably long term, I would guess, I would bet that he's probably a corner. Like if we're guessing, like, where is Russell Gage playing this time next year? We're talking about him with the cornerback group, not the wide receiver group. But again, I'll be curious to see if maybe he surprises me a little bit in that regard. Reggie Davis is an interesting player because I think Reggie Davis's best skill is his speed and his ability with the ball in his hands. And so I think he's kind of a natural option to be the return guy, which is a pretty wide open position right now. I think the Falcons have a number of guys competing for that spot. You have guys like Ito Smith, Calvin Ridley. They're talking about giving Justin Hardy a shot. You have Marvin Hall. You have Reggie Davis. I'm sure there's Isaiah Oliver is also in the mix as well, the cornerback. So I think that's going to be an opportunity for a guy like Reggie Davis in particular, just because I think of that group, he's probably the guy that is the most intriguing as a returner, just because of his speed and his sort of ability with the ball in his hands. We saw that last year on a couple of big catches that he had in the preseason. So I think he could make a real run if he is able to take advantage of what opportunity that he may have on special teams. The same goes with Marvin Hall and some of these other guys. But yeah, I think of the other guys in this group, looking at guys like Dantes Bird, I think he's really talented. Like to me, he's got a little bit of Taylor Gabriel in him. And I think, looking at his production and watching him on film and seeing how terrible his quarterback played, because he played on a Tennessee Tech team that only won one game last year. And so I feel like he's a guy that could be a little bit more talented than you would initially think, because if he actually had quality quarterback play, he could have really put up some monster production a year ago. So he's a guy that I'm intrigued by. Probably not a shot at making the roster just because of the other talent ahead of him, but certainly a guy that I'm intrigued by as a potential practice squad, maybe a guy that can be brought back next summer and maybe push for one of those depth roles and fulfill that role that you're talking about that might get vacated if Russell Gage moves over to defense or something like that.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the tight end group. And this is a pretty, the three guys that are pretty much going to make the roster. It's similar to running back group, but it's a little bit more up in the air just because you're going to have two of those guys competing for who's going to be the main backup behind Austin Hooper, and that's Eric Saubert in his second year, and now Logan Paulson, the veteran blocker that's been relatively quiet the last couple of years since he left Washington and left the warm bosom of Kyle Shanahan in Washington. So that'll be an intriguing battle, not necessarily your sexiest battle. Saubert has the receiving skills. Paulson has the blocking skills. I think in both guys' cases, they will definitely help their cause if Saubert can show improved blocking and if Paulson can actually catch a football because he dropped 1 million passes last year. If he can do that, then both of those guys will help their case either way it goes. What are your thoughts on this tight end battle?
I think Saubert wins. I think he surprises people with his blocking this coming season. It's one of those things that a guy who's a rookie, as long as he shows that he's trying, will eventually become a good blocker. And I think that's the guy that I'm seeing in Saubert. He put the effort forth as a rookie. He wasn't a bad blocker because he wasn't a trying blocker. He was a bad blocker because his technique was just shit. So, I mean, if you're asking me, I got no problem with seeing Saubert out there take the job and eventually learn how to be a full-time blocker.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Saubert because I do think, he did not have a good summer last year to the point where I think it was reasonable to think that he might have gotten cut as a 5th-round pick. And so I think with him, we didn't really see much of him early in the season, but like as the year progressed, he got a little bit more reps. And I think particularly late in the season when Toilolo got hurt for those couple of games and they had to use Ty Sambrailo as their blocking tight end, and Saubert got a few more reps those weeks. I do feel like when he was on the field, he was much better than he was, a couple of months earlier. And so that suggests that there was progress over the course of the year. And I'll be curious to see if there's continued progress going into this summer. I think he's a talented player. We talked about him a lot after we drafted him. And Scott, I always rolled my eyes a little bit at it, but you would always point out that athletically he was tested similarly to Rob Gronkowski. And I know you never meant to suggest that was what his potential was, but it is at least an intriguing athletic skill set when you look at that. So I
think his overall best potential is probably like if Hooper goes down, he's producing a lot like a Mercedes Lewis. Okay. Like that 40 catch, 500 yard, 4 to 5 touchdown guy. Like not going to lead any tight ends and stats for a year, but is going to be a solid enough starter to where if your starter goes down, you're like, all right, well, at least I've got this guy who can provide something for me.
Yeah. I think he's got some skills and I'm intrigued to see what he can do. Paulson was a guy that I did like several years ago when he was with Washington with Kyle Shanahan, and I thought a couple of years ago the Falcons would bring him in back in 2016 when they were out there trying to bring all these pieces to help get the offense on track off of that disappointing 2015 season. They did not. He went to Chicago instead. But he's a guy that I think is a competent role player, but obviously he's not going to bring a whole lot to the table more than what Toilolo did. I think I think he's a better player than Toilolo, but I think at the same time, because Toilolo had been in Atlanta for 5+ years, you
Yep.
knew exactly what Toilolo was, and you knew exactly how to use him. And Paulson, even though I think he's a better player, I don't necessarily know if he's going to come in and immediately show that, just because he's got to, get used to working with a new quarterback and a new coaching staff and all those sorts of things. So we'll see what he does. But I think because of that, because of those question marks surrounding him, it's a perfect opportunity for Eric Saubert to really sort of come in and take that number 2 spot, because I do think the Falcons would love to have a number 2 tight end that has Saubert's ability in the passing game. And if he can prove himself to be at least a serviceable, competent blocker that's not going to be a liability like he was early last season, then, that's a no-brainer for him to be the main number 2 tight end moving forward. Let's talk about the offensive line, and let's talk about this swing tackle position. The Falcons just have a whole bunch of bodies in the incomparable Ty Sambrailo among them, trying to compete to win who's going to have the honor of hopefully never seeing the field, because Jake Matthews and Ryan Schrader play every single snap this season.
I still don't understand why people hate Ty Sambrailo. I thought he did a decent enough job in the 150 snaps he played. I feel like the bigger issue last year when he was in there was the fact that it was Ty Sambrailo and Wes Schweitzer on the same side of the fucking field versus just Ty Sambrailo there with a competent right guard. So, don't get me wrong. I like Wes Schweitzer. I think he could be a good football player, but he just wasn't ready last year. But I thought Sambrailo was fine. He's not as good as a guy who should have gone to the Pro Bowl for the last 3 years, and Ryan Schrader. Oh my God, there's 3 tackles that are as good as Ryan Schrader in the league. So for me, it's I'm not hating what he put together. He put together competent, average NFL right tackle play. And people were like, oh my God, he sucks. NFL right tackles for the most part suck. That's just how it works. And he still wasn't that bad. I thought he was average, which for your backup is fine.
I'm one of the Ty Sambrailo haters. I think he was okay as a run blocker. I think he's got limitations. I feel like we know what Ty Sambrailo is. We know that he's a player that the minute he faces a good pass rusher, you're gonna immediately regret it. That's my main issue with Ty Sambrailo. Is he okay?
So you give him a chip. You know what you got there, though. That's the thing. It's not on Ty Sambrailo, the fact that he was put one-on-one in these games. It's on Sarkisian for putting a guy like Ty Sambrailo, after watching what Vic Beasley did to him last year, put in Ty Sambrailo against these guys that he can't handle. That's on Sarkisian. This guy can't handle this in pass protection, so you call a damn 7-man protection. It's not rocket science here.
That's
you got Schweitzer, or not Schweitzer, you got Schrader. You're used to having one of the best pass blocking right tackles in the league right there. You can't. It's on Sarkisian for that. I'm not going to blame Sambrailo for that, because you're going from a great pass blocker to Sambrailo, who is barely fringe replacement player at pass blocker. The reason why he's average is because he's a good run blocker. I'll say he did a good job run blocking.
Fair. Look, I hear what you're saying, Scott. I just feel I guess it's for me, I feel like if Ty Sambrailo is the best option we have as a swing tackle, what are we doing? I don't know. I just feel like it shouldn't be that hard to find a better player than Ty Sambrailo. That's my main issue, I guess. And I feel like Austin Pastor is that player, but due to injuries last year, got off to a slow start and wasn't really healthy until a couple of weeks into the season. And by that point, Schrader had already had his concussion and Sambrailo was playing. And so at that point, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to sort of change, horses midstream or whatever you want to call it. And so, I feel like now Pastor, that he's fully healthy, will have every opportunity to win this battle and should. And I feel like the Falcons can sort of end this Ty Sambrailo experiment once and for all and move on and get a better swing tackle that I won't have to sit here and make jokes about for the next 6 months or whatever. But I'll be curious to see this battle because another guy that I was very intrigued by last year that we signed was Daniel Brunskill. I know everybody was in love with the kid from UConn, Knappy, but I thought Brunskill is the guy that has a lot of intriguing tools just because he's a former tight end, very athletic, and showed his rawness because he only played 1 year tackle in college.
He's not that athletic. He's really not.
He didn't. I don't know if he tested particularly well.
He tested horribly compared to other offensive linemen. Yeah, he's this athletic guy because he played tight end. You know who else played tight end for a while? Eric Beverly, who also played guard in the NFL. Let's not sit here and act like just because a guy played tight end that he's athletic. There's a lot of guys out there that play tight end and are not athletic at all. And I can't name them because they're not in the league.
Okay.
The best one that I can name that's on the bottom of this list is Nick O'Leary. And that's about it.
Okay. Look, I like him. So, we'll have to fight about that at a later date. But I think he's talented. I'm intrigued to see what improvements he's made this year with a full year in an NFL weight room and with NFL coaching. So I'm intrigued by him. And I'll be curious to see if he can make a push. And, in the perfect world, Pastor and Brunskill both make the roster. And Brunskill can maybe be developed as a long-term swing tackle, maybe even.
In a perfect world, Brunskill's cut and Matt Gono makes the roster.
I like Gono too. I think he's raw, so I don't necessarily. I'm not necessarily excited about him making the team right away. I think he's more of a practice squad guy that they can sort of develop.
I think he's better than Brunskill, and I think he's a much better athlete than Brunskill.
He definitely tested better. I would agree with that.
He put up the same kind of he put the same or better numbers than Brunskill did, weighing 40 more pounds. He's way more athletic than Brunskill. That's my point. Yeah, Brunskill's athletic because he played tight end. No, dude, Brunskill is just at best a way below average NFL athlete. He scored in the 13th percentile as an athlete by my scores. That's nothing to be happy about.
Okay.
Gono scored better than Sombrero, which actually is something to be happy about because that means Gono is not too far off of, the Brandon Fusco, Andy Levitri type athlete.
All right. Okay. It's fine. I feel like you're insulting me by dissing my boy Daniel Brunskill, but it's fine. I'll let it go. We'll see what happens, basically. We'll see what happens. On the interior offensive line, I guess this is a battle technically because Wes Schweitzer has been getting first-team reps through the year. But I think we all expect Brandon Fusco to win that right guard spot. But, Scott, what are your thoughts on this potential competition?
If Wes Schweitzer wins this competition and Fusco ends up being a backup, one, it's a lot of money for a backup. A lot of money for a backup. But two, it means Sean Harlow's gone. And then it also means Schweitzer really stepped his shit up from last year. And he really learned how to take control of his position and figure out what was going on. So if Schweitzer wins, I'm expecting Fusco to win too. But if Schweitzer wins, that means that he's going to be much improved this year.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think there's a shot that Schweitzer could win the job. It's not a 0% chance, but it's probably not like a more than 20, 25-ish. So I feel like Fusco should win this job. But we'll see what happens. I mean, if Schweitzer does win the job, I'm not going to complain about it because obviously, Dan Quinn's a big believer in competition, and this would be an example of not letting a guy's draft status or his price tag dictate how much he plays. And so it would basically be the best guy won the job. And I'm not going to complain about that. So we'll see what happens. But again, yeah, I think Fusco probably wins it. But it'll be interesting to see if this is a real competition, and it's maybe one of those competitions that we get down to the third preseason game, and we're looking at this and saying like, oh, who the Falcons decide to start tonight is going to be the guy that wins the starting job, and we won't know until like the week of that third preseason game. So that could be interesting. You mentioned Sean Harlow. I don't think Sean Harlow's really in all that much danger of being cut.
I don't think he's going to make the roster. I would put money on it that Sean Harlow doesn't even come close to sniffing the roster by the time training camp's done. I was so unimpressed with him last year. I don't know if he's going to step up to the competition. And then when I look at the guard depth, I see Fusco, Garland, and then actual competition for him over there. Like Gono could end up playing a tackle guard type swing too. So that's the other reason why I like Gono. Pastor can play tackle or guard. So you've got a couple guys in there that can play tackle or guard and have done so at the NFL level. In Pastor, in Sambrelo, they've done it. So would I trust Sean Harlow, who's shown nothing in preseason games and who just looks like crap in preseason games, or would I trust Austin Pastor to fill out that roster spot? Like, could we have a situation where the four guys that are backup offensive linemen are Sambrelo, Pastor, Garland, and I'm blanking, and Schweitzer? Could that be that situation where you've got four guys who are basically interchangeable? You got multiple guys who played center, multiple guys who played guard, multiple guys who played tackle, and not just one or two, to where if you do have both guys go down in the same game, you'll be okay. I just don't see Harlow as being part of that group. And I honestly would not be shocked to see him get cut with Garland, Schweitzer, Pastor, and Sambrelo all making the roster.
Okay. I would be surprised. I don't think, I would, again, I won't sit here and go as far as say he's a lock, because I don't think he's a lock. But I would be very surprised if he winds up getting cut. I'm with you. I understand where you're coming from. Everything you say.
What happens to the 11th best offensive lineman that you have when you only carry 9?
See, but the difference between me and you is.
But what happens to the 11th best offensive lineman that you have after a season where he's not getting protected and redshirted? If he doesn't show improvement, what happens to that guy? He gets cut. Now he might get asked back for the practice squad, but he gets cut.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is I understand why you say that. I don't think he's the 11th best offensive lineman. I think I get everything you said. I don't necessarily disagree with. I think the difference is I think he started as poorly as anybody last summer. You could say that he was the worst player on the Falcons roster.
Sorry, Jamil Douglas was the name I was searching for.
Okay.
Because he's also on the roster. So you could have a situation where you don't have a spot for him.
I hear you. I just think, again, I think if you go by that first preseason game, I think you can make a very compelling argument that he was the worst player on the field for the Falcons. But I do think over the next couple of games, he showed a massive amount of improvement. And I don't think the Falcons, even if he doesn't necessarily have a great summer, I don't see the Falcons giving up on a 4th-round pick that easily, particularly a guy that does have some upside. And I expect him to show it this summer. I think he showed progress last summer. I think he'll show progress this summer. So while I can agree with you that at this point in time, based off of what little sample size he's shown to date, you can question a lot about him. You can question whether he's better than guys like Pastor or Sambrelo or Douglas or whoever. But I guess for me, I'm a little bit more optimistic in terms of projecting where I think he's going to be this summer. And I think he'll be good enough to make the roster as like the 9th offensive lineman. So I feel like I hear what you're saying. If he's the 11th guy, then yeah, he's probably going to get cut. But I'm pretty confident that he'll show up and he'll be like the 9th best guy, which will be good enough to make the team.
I don't think he's going to be the 9th best guy, but I guess that's just me. Here's the thing. Do you keep him or do you keep Austin Pastor? Because I don't see them getting rid of Sambrelo. As much as you want them to, I don't see them getting rid of Sambrelo.
See, that's there. I see them getting rid of Sambrelo. I think they keep both Pastor and Harlow.
Honestly, I'm shocked they didn't draft one of these guys in this past draft. They could have had a decent swing tackle at some point.
They could have. That they did. But, you know, again, I think it's also an indicator that the Falcons are pretty confident in Charlotte Harlow because a lot of people thought they would take a guard at some point. So,
they signed Cusco, so I wasn't expecting a guard.
Yeah, I know you and I weren't, but I'm just saying other people thought they were going to take a guard.
But, like, instead of Russell Gage, I don't know why they didn't take, I don't know. Let's see. Instead of Russell Gage, they could have gone with, I don't know, Matt Pryor out of Texas Christian or Greg Sinat out of Wagner, no relation to Deidre. Yeah, there's a couple of guys out there that it's like, this guy would have made sense. But
yeah, there was a couple of guys I had my eye on. Now, we sort of talked about this a little bit, and I guess, Scott, you've already given your answer. I guess I'll give mine, but let's talk a little bit about maybe an offensive player that could be a surprise cut. You know, I don't necessarily know if Terrence McGee qualifies as a surprise cut.
no.
But, you know, if I was to pick a guy that is probably the two guys that I think are most vulnerable to getting cut this summer, and I know, again, as I said at the top, popular choice is Matt Schaub, but I think either Ty Sambrelo or Logan Paulson are the two guys that I would say that you would normally think would be safe, but are about, I wouldn't say 50-50, but Sambrelo is about 50-50. I think Paulson's better odds than that. But, yeah, I think those two guys are on the hottest seats going into training camp.
Well, I would agree on Logan Paulson because Logan Paulson, I mean, there's a lot of guys there that you wouldn't expect on the roster that could end up surprising. Like Jaden Graham could surprise. I wouldn't be shocked if Alex Gray came out of nowhere and took that third tight end spot too. Just because he's got a year on the practice squad, he's a former rugby player. You don't have to teach him toughness. You don't really have to teach him too much on how to block. And he spent a year on the practice squad. So he's basically spent a year with professionals on how to play professional football. So he should at least have a decent enough understanding on how to do the basics. So, I mean, I see talent there. And I saw talent there last year when he was in games. It's like, all right, well, this guy's pretty decent. He's a good athlete. Like, why not? But Jaden Graham could shock a lot of people. So, and, you know, we're talking a blocking tight end here. Graham's a big dude, and it was a blocking tight end. So Paulson getting cut wouldn't be too shocking. I do think Sean Harlow gets cut. I don't think he shows improvement. And then the last guy that I think gets cut that would be super shocking to me is Justin Hardy. Now, that may get some eyebrows raised, but you've got Ridley, you've got Julio, you've got Sanu. I mean, you've got kind of Hardy. But what happens if Hall and Davis kill it this offseason, kill it in preseason, kill it in all of the different things that, you know, they're expecting him to do in training camp, and Hardy shits the bed and just has a bad camp and has a bad preseason and doesn't show what he can show? Do you stick with Hardy and, you know, let a guy like Russell Gage go who might be killing it on special teams? Or do you keep Hardy and, you know, cut your draft pick that you traded up for in the 6th round and hope that he hits your practice squad?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like, I don't think there's a chance that Justin Hardy gets cut. But I do think it's a question that people will raise because Justin Hardy isn't like, he doesn't have sex appeal. Like, he doesn't have the sex appeal of Calvin Ridley. And he doesn't have the speed and the playmaking ability of some of the other guys lower on the depth chart than him.
He doesn't even have the sex appeal of Harry Douglas. Let's call it what it is.
I think Justin Hardy is a really solid player. I think he's a coach's player. I think he's the guy that will do anything that you want. You want him to block, he'll block. You want him to play special teams, he'll play special teams. You're right. You want him to, run crossing routes or outs and whatever, play in the slot, play outside. He does everything that the coaching staff wants him to do. And so I think that makes him a lot more secure than probably a lot of fans think. But I think it is at least worthy of a conversation because technically, if the Falcons are going to cut one of their wide receivers, he would be the obvious choice to happen because he's not a starter, he's not a first-round pick, and he doesn't run a 4.3. So, he's a name that I'm sure that certain people will bandy about this summer as a guy because, he doesn't go out and light it up in preseason games and make all these amazing highlight reel catches. And so he's a guy that will get talked about at some point in the next, month or so about a guy that could be vulnerable. But I don't think he's really in any danger, but I think he's worth discussing at least in that regard. Okay, let's get into the mailbag questions. Our first one comes from Falcons Andy. He asked, do you think there are any positions on the roster that the Falcons are considering upgrading with a veteran, whether via trade, free agent, or future cuts? Obviously, we mentioned fullback at the top. Is there another position, or do you want to elaborate more on the fullback?
I mean, I could elaborate more on fullback, but I think if there was another spot, it'd be tight end. I know I said there's a lot of talent there, but I could also see them saying, you know what? Let's get that true pass catcher that just got released, or let's go out and get Ladarius Green, or one of those free agents that's available. So, I mean, I wasn't expecting them to go out and get Ron Parker, and then they magically went out and got Ron Parker. So, you never know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think fullback is an obvious choice, by far the obvious choice. I think there's a shot that if a veteran, if a Mercedes Lewis type of player, like I don't think Mercedes Lewis is an option, but that type of player that is a proven veteran, solid number 2 tight end, and like Brent Selleck type of guy. I think Brent Selleck is still available. So like there's a chance that the Falcons, if they don't like what they see from Saubert this summer and from Paulson this summer, they could go out and sign a Brent Selleck type. I think there's a shot that they could once again do revolving chairs at the swing tackle position, just because again I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Ty Sambrailo. So I think if another talented swing tackle, surprisingly, basically one of the interesting things, and this is a thing that why
Kobe
the Falcons
available.
Who?
Kobe Fleener.
Okay, yeah.
What if they like a guy like Kobe Fleener or a guy like Julius Thomas?
Yeah, guys like that. I think the interesting thing about the swing tackle is what I was going to say is, and one of the reasons why the Falcons had to give up so much to get Ty Sambrailo is because there aren't that many good swing tackles. Nope. And so there's it's kind of like, it's not the same, but it's kind of like the quarterback position where there aren't enough good number 3 offensive tackles to go around for all 32 teams. And so if for some reason a team decided that they didn't want to get rid of one of the few guys that is actually a proven decent swing tackle, then maybe the Falcons could go out and get that guy. But probably more likely they'll just settle for whoever's the best out of this group of guys that they're bringing to camp. So I think those are some positions that they could potentially go out and add another player at, maybe.
Well, and here's the other thought. Why not go out and get Luke Jekyll?
Because I don't know if Luke Jekyll's a tackle. I think he's really a guard at this point in his career.
And also, he didn't say that this is just offense-oriented. What about defense? Why not go out and get – I mean, they've got cap room. So why not look at some potential guys like, I don't know, Jonathan Hankins, and see if Hankins will take a year for $4 million. Like what Terrell McClain took. And let those two guys battle it out.
McClain got less than that. He got like $2 million.
He got $2 million that hits the cap, but he really got the potential for $4.
Oh yeah, incentives and whatnot, but
yeah, and the incentives are a lot easier to hit than people realize.
Yeah, I mean, D tackle is an obvious area of concern on the defense. If you could get a guy like Hankins for that price, then by all means do so. That's always been the big question with Hankins. Is he going to take a cheap deal? History tells us no, but we'll see how that goes.
And why not Eric Reed? Now, a lot of people are saying guys like Eric Reed and Kenny Vaccaro and like that are out of work because they're kneeling. Kenny Vaccaro is out of work because he sucks. Eric Reed's actually good and probably should be signed. But Kenny Vaccaro fucking blows. If we're being honest here.
No, that's fair. I don't disagree with anything you said. But now that we have Ron Parker, do we really need to go out and get another safety?
Oh, I'm not looking at Eric Reed as a safety.
Oh, you're talking about him as a linebacker.
Eric Reed's 225 pounds. Why not Coy wire him?
Okay.
You know, make him a linebacker. Make him a weak side linebacker and hope he, you know, I know a lot of people are looking at this thought of Eric Reed as a linebacker. Oh, that's a bad idea. But why not use him in the nickel, him and Deion Jones, and have Devondre Campbell be a pure pass rusher in the nickel? I think you'd have better coverage, and I think Reed would enjoy that role better. I know it's not his ideal role. He'd rather be starting at free safety or some shit like that, but Atlanta doesn't need him at safety. And I think he fits better as that box safety linebacker type thing that you could use him at. And why not use him as like a safety / linebacker? So if you roll out in your nickel and then all of a sudden there's 4 wide receivers, you just slide him over and he's a slot corner. He's got that kind of versatility to me. So why not bring it in and have it for depth on the roster? He's got to be better than, let's see, Emmanuel Ellerbe, Richard Jarvis, Anthony Wimbush. Like, the Falcons have maybe 4 competent linebackers on the roster right now, or 4 like proven-ish linebackers, in Campbell, Jones, Riley, and then Kamal Ishmael. That's their linebacking core. The rest are guys fighting for a job, like Foye, Aluakon, and all those other guys. And I think Aluakon gets a role, but why not bring in Reed and have another safety / linebacker type in the fold?
I wouldn't complain about it. Yeah, I think linebacker is another position where the Falcons could potentially go out and get somebody at the end of camp as well.
And then the other thought, and just one last spot, is why not edge? Why not go out and get Junior Gillette?
Well, you kind of know why they wouldn't get Junior Gillette.
Well, I know why they wouldn't get Junior Gillette. All right, it's a bad example, but why not go out and get Robert Ayers?
Okay, that makes a little bit worse.
He'd be an upgrade over Shelby.
And he can play. He can kick inside the nickel.
Why not go out and get a guy like, I don't know, Charles Johnson, who's a free agent right now from Carolina?
Charles Johnson.
He'd be hell in practice, but I mean.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
He's only 32 and he's a free agent, so.
I don't think the edge is that pressing of an issue. I think they have enough guys there, but we'll see. I mean, again, injuries are always that sort of thing that creeps up and certainly changes the narrative at certain position groups. So we'll see what happens. And, yeah, I think there are a couple of spots, basically. The moral of the story is a couple of spots Falcons could wind up addressing at the end of camp if they're not happy. And, you know, the good thing about this coaching staff, unlike previous ones, is that they are willing to do that. They're not afraid to go out there and make changes the week before the season because they're not happy with the roster.
Which is good.
Okay, Andy's next question comes, what changes do you expect to see to Sark's offense, or is it just a case of better execution needed?
I expect to see actual game planning for an NFL roster. I expect to see Greg Knapp coming in and saying, hey, this is probably what we should do against the New Orleans Saints. Hey, this defense runs a lot of pattern matching. Maybe we should run this to combat it because, you know, this is what I've used in the past and it's worked against this, I don't know, Mike Smith defense. So why not have Greg Knapp be that second offensive coordinator. You couldn't have Bush Hamdan do it last year because Bush Hamdan's a scrub, but you could have Greg Knapp do it because he's got 20 years of being a quarterback's coach or an offensive coordinator in the NFL. I trust Greg Knapp with that kind of role more than I trust Bush Hamdan, especially when we're talking about an offense that Greg Knapp has run for the last 20 years, that zone blocking running game, that, West Coast Walshian style passing game. So for me, Sarkisian needs to run the Walshian style, Shanahan style offense that will actually work, and having Knapp here will help him actually run that and base everything around that outside zone and using the play action and utilizing the things like the Yankee route that actually work, those deep crossers, using things that, rub routes against man coverages that the Eagles run because they can't run zone for shit. Like little things that Greg Knapp would notice that Sarkisian didn't, and that Bush Hamdan wasn't experienced enough or smart enough to see. So you needed to have a guy who could be that offensive coordinator and have that guy who's that basically backup offensive coordinator on the roster.
I'm definitely going to be curious to see what changes. Because I think when you look at the Falcons' personnel moves, it strongly suggests that they're going to focus more on those three wide receiver sets due to what they invested in Calvin Ridley and relative to what they didn't really invest in the fullback or tight end position this offseason. But at the same time, hiring a guy like Greg Knapp suggests that they're, still fully committed to the West Coast play action based offense that, as Scott alluded to, Greg Knapp has run for many, many years. That, he ran a version of that in Houston after Kyle Shanahan, that QBX style of offense. So, there you could make an argument that the Falcons have shown indicators that they're moving away from that type of offense, but showing indicators that they're doubling down on that offense. So I'm curious to sort of see how that bears out actually on the field in terms of play calling. Are they going to be more committed to that type of offense? And if that's the case, then maybe we don't see this monster rookie season from Calvin Ridley to the degree that, at least the potential that he could have. But at the same time, they could realize, 4 games into the season, wait, we just, gave up this high draft pick for this superstar phenom wide receiver. Why are we not giving him more opportunities? And they figure out that, let's feed him the ball and these other wide receivers as much as possible to get this offense back to this sort of its high flying, impossible to defend nature that we saw, in 2016. So I guess I expect everything to happen and nothing to happen, I guess is my answer to the question, Andy. I don't really know. And so we'll see what happens. But I'm definitely curious, definitely intrigued, and certainly going to be paying. The problem is in the summer, you're not really going to know because they're not really doing anything. So we still are, until that game against the Eagles, we really won't know anything about this offense until that game. So we'll just have to be a little patient, I guess, and hope that whatever crumbs we get during the preseason will, I don't know, whatever metaphor I need to use to make that make sense. So, yeah. We got a couple of mailbag questions from Evan Birchfield. His first one is probably way too early, but which Falcons players could you see as training camp cuts? We already talked about that. I want to save the defensive ones till the next show. Yep. So his next question is, any thoughts on the Madden ratings? Trufant is the 3rd highest rated cornerback. I'm sorry.
I think that sounds about right. But maybe I'm the only one that feels that way in the entire Falcon fan base because, I watch the film and look at it and I go, dude, Trufant's a fucking awesome cornerback. But maybe it's just me.
People, the Alfred Trufant, it's weird that the vast majority of Falcon fans can only support one corner at a time. It's weird to me how people People were very pro Trufant, anti Alford. Then people became very pro Alford, anti Trufant, and sort of now you have people sniping online who's better rather than just saying, can't we all just get along and like both of our? I like both of our cornerbacks to a huge degree. To me, it's one of those things where it's like, why do we have to pick one? I'm actually looking at Twitter right now and seeing people fighting about Alford and Trufant.
Yeah, it's stupid.
But to answer your question, Evan, I don't really have any thoughts on the Madden ratings. It's like, okay, that's cool. Like, it's a video game. I don't play Madden, so it's one of those things like I don't really care if a guy's a 93 or an 89 or 86 or 94. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just a number for a video game. It's cool if you play Madden. It's interesting if you play Madden, but if you're thinking it applies to anything other than a video game, it's kind of a waste of time, if you ask me. But I'm an old man, so you kids get off my lawn.
All I know is Calvin Ridley better have a 90 plus in route running, because if anybody watches college film, that's where it should be. And I want my Madden to be realistic. And Calvin Ridley having a 90 plus in route running and a 90 plus in speed and a 90 plus in agility and all that, then I'll be happy.
There you go. Evan Birchfield's next question is, what percentage chance is there the Falcons stand their ground and Julio doesn't get a new contract this offseason?
0.
I mean, wait, new contract? Are we talking about like a brand new contract? I would hope there's a 0% chance that Julio gets a brand new contract.
No. I'm saying like that nothing happens with his contract.
Okay, yeah, like there's a difference between getting a new contract and the Falcons tweaking his deal. Like, I think there's like a 95% chance they tweak his deal, and I think there's like a 0% chance they give him a brand new contract. So like they'll tweak his deal, give him a little bit more money, give him a nice little raise, be like, here, Julio, take this $2 million, take this $3 million, and go shut up and score some touchdowns. and like that'll be it. Like, but in terms of like tearing up his current contract and giving him like another deal that makes him the highest paid wide receiver, like if the Falcons do that, like, look, I'm not gonna hate on Julio for get your money, Julio. Do you make as much money as you possibly want? You deserve all the money that the Falcons decide to pay you. But like if the Falcons decide to do that, like they're just kind of stupid. Like you have a guy under a 3-year contract. Why would you give him a brand new deal? Just pay him as the 7th highest paid wide receiver, or maybe bump it up to make him like the 4th highest paid wide receiver, and not worry about it. Like that's all you have to do. You don't have to give him a brand new contract. Okay.
I'm tired of talking about the Julio deal.
Yeah. So, okay. How does Braun Parker fit on this team?
He's the backup strong safety and probably competing for the for like the dime-ish role, but probably special teams more than anything else.
Yeah, I think, the Falcons will throw out some 3 safety looks from time to time. Maybe we can talk about this on the next show, but I'm hoping that they throw out more of them this year than they did last year. So I think Parker's in the mix to be that spot. Him and KZ will compete over that. Obviously, Parker has experience, so that maybe give him a nod. But again, the Falcons obviously like Devontae Casey, so that'll be a fun battle that we can talk about in 2 weeks. I think you're right. Backup strong safety. He'll play some dime looks. He'll play some special teams. He'll be a solid role player. When he does get on the field, they'll probably ask him quite a lot to cover tight ends, which is something that he can do at a pretty high level. If, in a pinch, if, they have multiple injuries in their secondary, they could ask him to play a little bit of slot corner for him. That's an option as well. But again, that requires multiple people to get hurt for that to happen. And he's a very versatile player that can basically play any role that you want him in the secondary. So he fits with this team a lot of ways. Okay, Evan's last question for tonight, our last mailbag question. What are your top 3 concerns / questions going into training camp?
Ooh. Right guard would be my biggest question going into training camp. Making sure that they have a competent one there, making sure that Fusco really is what I think he is. It's the whole Sarkisian situation. And then whatever the hell happens at nose tackle, whether it's Terrell McClain or Deidre Sanat or whoever wins that job, make sure that they do a damn good job.
Yeah, I think mine are similar. Of course, yeah, I'm going to have to go with the fullback position because I'm the only person on this planet that obsesses about the fullback position to the degree that I do. So that is a big question for me. I would say Sark, but just because, as I said earlier, like I don't know how much we're going to learn in training camp because you specifically framed it as a training camp question, Evan. It's not one of my top 3 questions, but it certainly is the number 1 question that I have going into the season. But I think in training camp, like I just don't feel like we're going to learn too much about the offense. So I'll tweak it a little bit and say my question is, how much is Calvin Ridley going to get used? So I guess that's a question for me. And then the third one is the D tackle position, as Scott said. Who's going to emerge there? And really, particularly in the pass rush, Jack Crawford, Terrell McClain, Deidre Sanat. Like, are we going to get a fourth option to our triumvirate of great pass rushers? You know, not counting the incomparable
Triumvirate.
Yeah, that's what the Ringer. Whatever. I don't speak Latin. Okay.
Dude, did you never learn about Julius Caesar and Marcus Aurelius? And
I did. I know what it is. I just never had to say it out loud. Triumvirate. Yes, the triumvirate of pass rushers. I'm sorry. Well, there you guys have it. A little Latin grammar lesson at the end of the show. And we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about the defensive positional battles. We'll do the same thing we did. And, of course, answer your Falcons mailbag questions. You can use the hashtag Falcons mailbag to get those questions in. Send them my way. I'm at FalcFan. Scott is at Karasik S. You can, of course, send them to Pro Football Central's Twitter, which is PF Central. Follow us on Facebook, Falcon Central Radio. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, Pro Football Central. Make sure you hit the bell so that you never miss a live broadcast in the future. And yeah, that's it. You got anything else you want to say, Scott, before we're this close to actual football being played?
I know. I'm tired of talking about baseball.
There you go. All right, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.